I always consider myself healthy.
I don't think it's ever been enough to just look healthy on the outside. And obviously you can't feel your cholesterol going up. You can't feel your blood pressure being slightly above the normal range. You can't feel these things until the consequences of those things are out of whack.
At 10:30, and the first thing I did was do a blood test. Every time I get a blood test or anything to do with health, you're the first person I call.
I'm really excited to see what RNT can do, helping people look under the hood, giving them the tools that they will need for their long-term health. Things are going on inside them that I kind of wish more people knew about. Because I always say this to my patients as well, like if only they really knew. If you look at the top 10 killers, so ischemic heart disease is top, strokes are second. After that is cancers and things. For obesity, while it's 30 and above for Caucasians, for those who are Asians, over 27 would be considered obese.
South Asians were the worst fat oxidizers in the other races, which is quite interesting.
If we intervene early enough and get people healthy enough, then they can enjoy their lives without worrying.
Okay, so as you know, once you get into your 30s, everything changes. In your 20s, you can get away with anything. And then all of a sudden you enter your 30s and you have a kid. You start thinking about your mortality. You start thinking about your longevity, your health. You start doing blood tests. And ironically, I never did a single blood test in my 20s. And my first one was actually 2022. So, which was when I turned 30. I turned 30, and the first thing I did was do a blood test. And I know every time I get a blood test or anything to do with health, you're the first person I call. You know, whether it's my toenail going black and it's fallen off, or whether you've seen a lot of different pictures of different body parts.
Too many.
So I think there was always this like natural sort of relationship we had where you were like the doctor in my life, and I would share different things, but especially around like health and longevity and just sort of like health risks. Because, you know, for years we focused on sort of fitness, building strength, building muscle. And it's only in the last few years I've probably thought, okay, well, what's actually going on under the hood? So, you know, I did my first blood test when I turned 30. So 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, actually, did another one 18 months later, and would do another one very shortly. And I'm probably thinking that the frequency needs to go up. But either way, we've sort of had informal conversations for a few years around like, you know, could this be part of RNT? Is there an angle here for RNT? But because, you know, RNT started as purely an aesthetics focus, we just didn't really see the connection. But then over the years, and as it's evolved, as our clientele's evolved, we've noticed, and I've noticed specifically, a growing demand for more understanding of what's going on under the hood. And we have more and more members now who, you know, in their first inquiry call, will share with our team their HbA1c numbers. They'll share their cholesterol numbers. They'll say that this has been a reason why they're joining. And one of the biggest reasons people join is they've had a wake-up call with their health or health risk. And then through the journey, some people who, especially who are into data, they might decide to share their results of their blood tests, and, you know, sort of show like before and afters. And then, you know, as this was growing more and more, I reached out to you again. I think this is the time now to do something quite interesting. So, you know, we dabbled in a few different ideas, and then I'd say, as you said to me yesterday, we kind of went from like 0 to 100 in 10 days.
literally 100.
So, I mean, I think this podcast is going to be interesting as we talk about all the different things that BioHealth is going to include. And I'll introduce BioHealth more formally in a second. But to kick off with, why don't you introduce yourself and your credentials, just to understand why you're well placed to be a part of this. And then also, I guess maybe first thing is why you're excited to be a part of this project.
Good introduction. So yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dr. Minil Patel. You might find me on Instagram as Dr. Iron Junkie. That name has stuck with me since I was about 17. I don't know why, but it is what it is. But I'm a fully qualified doctor in the UK. I'm board certified in family medicine, or I'm a member of the Royal College of General Practitioners. So I've finished my kind of training, and I'm a fully fledged GP as well. But for the longest time, like even since medical school, my interests have always been in health, fitness, preventative medicine, looking at like lifestyle to combat chronic disease and things, rather than focusing on just a medical management of stuff. Like I've always looked at, okay, how can we work with exercise, nutrition, sleep, kind of what levers can you pull to prevent these diseases happening. And we know chronic disease is so prevalent, like it's, a huge burden of disease in the US, UK. In most developed countries, most things we see are kind of your metabolic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, even cancers and things. And a lot of them have a big lifestyle component to them. So then I guess right now I'm actually pursuing a further qualification. I want to be board certified in lifestyle medicine, so that hopefully by the end of this year I will have that ticked off as well, just as a to make it official. But I've always been sort of interested in this field anyway. So I guess it naturally, the paths kind of cross, because if you're looking at health and fitness, that it's an intersection with lifestyle medicine, really. And I always said to you, like, look, whenever you share your client stories, they're amazing. Like, a lot of them, not only do they lose a ton of body fat and build a lot of muscle in the same process, like you said, their HbA1c improves, their cholesterol improves, they feel fitter. Things are going on inside them that I kind of wish more people knew about. Because I always say this to my patients as well. Like, if only they really knew that, they get given these numbers a lot often. They get a blood test done. They get given these numbers, and they get given very kind of like throwaway advice on what these numbers mean and what they do. I don't think patients are left really understanding what they mean, and I don't think the clients as well fully understand what they mean. Obviously, we live in a day and age where you can Google or chat GPT anything you want and get a pretty comprehensive answer. But I think that relationship with someone who is clued up on it and is in the medical space, but also understands the fitness aspect of things, is something that's probably lacking, and RNT has probably been lacking that for a while as well. So obviously, when you approached me about this project, being someone that's gone through the RNT journey myself in 2019 with you, obviously we got me absolutely shredded. It's only fitting that I would somehow. I remember us talking about this as well. There was always a place for me somewhere in your team, in a way. We didn't know what it quite was, but I guess naturally, as you said, it's progressed to this, because you and I have been sharing thoughts about kind of our own health and biomarkers and things for some time, and obviously it kind of naturally has progressed into this. So yeah, I'm obviously super excited, because you're working with people who are already at the stage where they've had that wake up call. They want to take control of their life. Maybe they've had these blood tests done. Okay, now, or maybe some of them haven't, but are interested. So we can see where they are at the start of their journey. What is their metabolic health like? What are their sort of other physical parameters like? Are they in a good position? And then actually, through RNT, can we make a huge difference and see actually, make it as part of their journey? So yeah, I'm really excited to see what RNT can do, kind of helping people look under the hood, and kind of giving them the tools that they will need for their long-term health, and yeah, from all sides, really.
Amazing. So the overall experience / program is going to be called BioHealth, and there's going to be a number of ways where people can interact with that, and I'll share that later on in the podcast. But to kick off, and what the goal of today's podcast is to talk about, what is BioHealth, what are we looking at, what are the measures, and also just sort of talk about some of the myths and maybe a lot of the noise that's going on in the longevity space. The longevity space is a massively growing sector in the health and fitness industry, well, probably in the health space. And more and more celebrities are putting their names behind longevity brands. Like, it's a very trendy sort of thing, and people are throwing out outrageous number of biomarkers to test to sound really, really cool. So before we get into that, why is it no longer enough to, well, it's probably never been the case, but why is it no longer enough to just look healthy on the outside? Like, is it dangerous to just rely on how you look as a sign of your internal health or being healthy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I guess, you said it yourself. I don't think it's ever been enough to just look healthy on the outside. There's been this perception, especially we live in a kind of social media world, that if you see someone on Instagram with six-pack abs, you just assume that they're really healthy. You and I both know that when you're at your leanest, you might not actually be the healthiest position. That's probably fair to say. Like, you'll be, when you get extra lean, but you're looking kind of really ripped, you're usually really tired, your hormones have completely plummeted, you're fatigued, you're not in the best place either, right? You've lost quite a bit of muscle mass as well at that end stage. It just happens. And a lot of people look really slim and lean and might not be quite healthy. Go on.
Just the caveat. This is like, we're talking about extremes of getting shredded.
Yeah.
Probably
this is like
not the average.
No, not the average. But this is what I'm saying. When you're on Instagram and you're seeing these bodybuilders, especially, right? Yeah. People are thinking, oh, these guys have loads of muscle. They're super lean, super shredded, like paper thin skin, when they're stepping on stage. This is like the extremes, right? People automatically assume, oh, these guys must be really healthy, right? I mean, some people assume that, but what I'm trying to say is, on the inside, there's a lot going on that they may not be checking, one, or two, they're not revealing. It's the other, right? So be very wary of just judging how healthy someone is by the fact that they have six-pack abs. It also says nothing about how aerobically fit you are. Like, you could be really muscular and fit, but it tells me nothing about how fast you can run a mile, or how long you can sustain a high heart rate for. Anything that doesn't tell me anything about your VO2 max, your resting heart rate. All these figures are linked to longevity and good health as well. And obviously, you can't feel your cholesterol going up. You can't feel your blood pressure being slightly above the normal range, or even in a dangerous range. You can't feel these things until the consequences of those things are out of whack. So, like, if we take blood pressure, for example, you only really feel the symptoms of it when you have headaches from a really high blood pressure. But at the level that the damage is being done to the small blood vessels in the brain, the eyes, the kidneys, the heart, you don't really feel that until you have like a heart attack, or you have like chest pain from it. And that takes a long time to build up. So just going by how you're feeling is not always good either. Similarly, you can't feel your cholesterol being high. You can't feel plaque building up in the arteries. This is not stuff that you feel until it comes to a critical point where enough of the artery is blocked off by plaque, and then you have your first heart attack, or you get your chest pain from angina. I could go on, like, sugar is the same thing, kidney function, all these things. You don't really feel it until it's hitting a critical point where things spill over, and then the symptoms start displaying themselves. So I think it's really important that you don't just go by how you look and how you feel, but we start to look, as you said, under the hood with measuring things as well.
And maybe I'll use myself as an example in that I always consider myself healthy, and I say, in the grand scheme of things, I am healthy. My BioHealth score is very productive, although there's still work to be done, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the scoring system shortly. But one of the areas that I'm probably always going to struggle with is my cholesterol. And maybe there's a genetic component to it. Maybe it's the fact that I was eating red meat 3 times a day for 10 years. I don't know. There's probably a bunch of different factors here. But it's one of those things that, even if I do everything right, and I feel like I do most things right, there's going to be an element of like, I need to keep an eye on this cholesterol. But if I don't keep an eye on what's going on in the hood, it could creep into a dangerous territory without me knowing what's going on.
Cholesterol is just one example where, like, if you don't monitor it, you don't know where it is, then later on the damage that is done happens over years and years and years. So you want to kind of check early, put your interventions in early, and then check again to make sure that it's what you've changed is actually working. And I guess, for you, I think there are still a few things that we could probably take an effort and really work on, and then retest to see if those things that we put in worked. And if they didn't, then actually, there is a place for medical management of raised cholesterol. I'm all about lifestyle, and RNT, we're all about lifestyle. But at the end of the day, if people want to speak to their physician about going on medication, that's not something to be ashamed of. And I don't think we should be saying to people to not do that either at all. So let's make that clear as well.
Yeah. Okay. What would you say are some like common silent health issues you see? People who look fit, they feel fit, they've lost a bunch of weight, they're in great shape, and what are some of the silent sort of health issues or things that you see, especially when it comes to metabolic health?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a good example for like busy kind of high performing individuals is blood pressure. Really, you're living a high stress life often. You're always on the go. You're always kind of meeting deadlines. All these things. You may be exercising and looking after yourself, but if you're always in this chronic state of stress, not only does that is linked to kind of chronic sort of low level inflammation, but it can raise blood pressure as well. If you're kind of fueling up on caffeine all the time, having poor sleep, all of these things do throw your overall health out of whack as well. And the first thing that we see is usually a slightly higher resting heart rate, slightly higher blood pressure as well. That's quite common, and often getting people to reduce their caffeine intake. And some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others, so not everyone will have the same response. Some people are very sensitive, and they've got a genetic predisposition to having this effect with caffeine. So even one coffee can raise their blood pressure really high. So you need to find these people and actually amend that for these sort of people. And then also getting them to focus on sleep as well is really tricky, especially how it is as a dad and entrepreneur. Like, you probably sacrifice sleep more often than not, and we know sleep is so important for your overall health. The other big thing is processed food consumption. So being always on the go. Slim people working in offices, they tend to go for food that's easily available and accessible, and that can often lead to even people that seemingly outwardly look slim, they may be developing kind of fatty liver disease, which can predispose to kind of insulin resistance as well, which we'll talk about more about in a bit as well. But it's that's hidden away as well, and it's considered another silent killer as well. Fatty liver disease is becoming kind of more well known now. 20, 30 years ago, people that had fatty liver, you think, oh, they're obviously chronic alcoholic or something, but we're actually finding that there's such a high intake of processed foods, which are so calorie rich with refined sugars, saturated fats, all these things, is increasing that risk of fatty liver, and then that's going on to lead to things like insulin resistance as well. The other thing we find with, again, high performing people, again, they may be really healthy, working out, but depending on what they're eating, so if they're eating a diet that's really high in animal products, really high in saturated fats especially, and very low in fiber, these people tend to have high cholesterol, especially if they're genetically predisposed as well. So they'll think, okay, I feel great, I look good, I've got muscles, this and that. Actually, when they get a blood test done, they're like, oh, my cholesterol came back high. I hear all too often, with patients.
I was one of them.
You were one of them as well. Yeah, you sent me a result, and I was like, well, your cholesterol's a bit high. And this was after you'd gone vegan as well. Yeah, so you probably have maybe a genetic predisposition as well, as most South Asians do. I think us compared to Caucasians, we tend to run higher on that risk. We need to actually maintain a lower body fat percentage and a lower body weight to stay in a healthier range. We can talk about that as well.
Well, can you just talk on that? Why is it South Asians more at risk? And also the interesting bit you mentioned there around body weight, because a lot of South Asians often give us kickback. If I just speak broadly, South Asians tend to give kickback about their body weight being lower. But I think it was Ivan who said that there's actually tables and research show that their healthy BMI is actually different to a normal person's BMI, and they should actually stay on the leaner, lighter side of things because of so many predispositions. Maybe you can talk about why that's the case.
Yeah. So first we'll talk about that BMI thing you mentioned as well. So obviously everyone talks about BMI as not being a great kind of a tool to use. I think it's got its place. So for generalization, it's got quite a good tool. So over 30 is considered in the obese category, but over 25 to 30, so that stage is considered overweight. The healthier range is considered less than 25, right? But actually for Asians, it's actually different. So for South Asians and Chinese and Japanese and the kind of Southeast Asian population as well, you sort of want to be in a BMI less than 23 to be considered a healthy range. So when you get to 24, 25, you're actually already in the overweight category, right? Whereas Caucasians, it's 25 and above. And for obesity, while it's 30 and above for Caucasians, for those who are Asians, like Asians like subcontinent or Southeast Asian, you want to be 27, so less than 27. So over 27 would be considered obese. The reason being is because the risks that we see in the obese category that come with 30 and above for Caucasians start happening sooner and earlier in BMI 27 range for these populations for Asians. There's multiple theories as to why this is. Genetics plays a huge role, of course, right? But there's multiple genetics. There's not just one gene that we can pin this on. It's multiple genetics. There's also this whole theory about South Asians being famine adapted as well. So our ancestors went through multiple periods of famines and having food and famines again, and that sort of adapted us to be in an environment where there's very little calories. So when there is food in abundance, we sort of hold on to that in a different way. And that affects our kind of metabolic biology in a different way as well. It's very interesting. And I think we're kind of seeing the results of, maybe colonialism and all of that now as well. So we can dwell on why it happens and all of that, but really the reality is we should be telling South Asians, look, we need to actually stay lighter than our Caucasian counterparts, and we need to try and stay more muscled as much as we can as well, because we know muscle is such a good sink for things like glucose as well, and it helps with kind of energy metabolism.
And is that irrespective of muscle mass? So let's say, for example, I'm probably on I'm probably 24, 25, I think, for my BMI. Even if I'm relatively lean, would I need to consider the fact that I probably need to get a bit lighter?
No. So again, this is why BMI isn't always a good tool, because when it comes to body composition, that always wins out. So for you, using your waist to height to height ratio and using your body composition trumps using BMI for someone who is obviously muscular and lean. We're talking
there's
about
a point of diminishing returns for that, right? I mean, for natural people, they're probably not going to get to the point where it's unhealthy, because you're not going to be, you're probably not going to have a BMI of 30 naturally and
unless
being
you're
lean. Being lean.
Unless you're like a rugby player, like it's like
but they're not lean, are they?
Relatively, well, again, body composition wise, relatively, rugby players and American football players, the BMI is closer to 30, and they are relatively lean. Again, it's all about body composition.
Are they natural?
Well, a lot of them are. A lot of them are. So, but yeah, for them, the risk is going to be different. And actually, but also there's an argument for how much muscle as well, because we know at the higher range of being over muscled is also not a good idea as well. And it has come to its own kind of risks with high blood pressure and things like that. We're seeing it with bodybuilders today, whether it's the results of steroids or whether it's the results of carrying around extra weight. We see a lot of these strong men and bodybuilders now downsizing for the longevity benefits. There's loads of people out there, we don't need to sort of name names, but they are downsizing for those reasons.
Yeah, but for the audience who are listening, I mean, they're not in that category.
Yeah, the average person just needs to make sure that they stay in what I would call a healthy BMI range for them, but really look at their waist to height circumference. And if they've got a capability of measuring their body composition, then that's great as well. If they can find out how much visceral fat they have. So this is the fat that's kind of around the organs and things, because the higher that number is, then obviously that conveys more risk as well. And it's in South Asians that we see them preferentially put on visceral fat. So the fat under our skin isn't thought to be as harmful as visceral fat. So that central fat that you put around your organs and around your waist, which helps to kind of give you that crude measurement of your waist circumference, that sort of fat is more damaging than the fat under the skin, relatively anyway.
Yeah, it was interesting. When I did my dissertation at university, we were studying fat oxidation and diet, the relationship between the two. And I ran like a sub-analysis on the ethnicity of the people that we were using. Do you remember I telling you this?
I remember this, yeah.
And the South Asians were the worst fat oxidizers than the other races, which is quite interesting.
Yeah. We've got the cards stacked against us in some ways. So I guess, we have to work a bit harder as well and be aware of those risks. Yeah.
Why? So let's get into the scoring areas. Well, the core testing areas. We're calling it the BioHealth stack. So they are a curated recommendation. I can't give it a name.
Yeah, lots of names. Yeah.
It's a curated recommendation of 27 to 32 biomarkers that we're picking, and the reason why there's a range is it depends on the lab that you have. So there's different labs that will do different things, and some won't do certain things. So there's a range. But this is what the scoring is based on. And there's a combination of blood biomarkers and physical measurements, which have the greatest impact on metabolic health and ultimately what we can impact through a body transformation. Why do we choose to focus on, well, maybe maybe you first share the 5 core testing areas and then why we chose each of these areas. Now, we don't need to get into the nitty gritty of all the different biomarkers. We'll do that in part 2. But just to give like a headline overview of the core testing areas and why we chose them.
Good question. So I think, obviously we've talked about metabolic health being one of the first ones, right? So do you want me to go into kind of what we're testing in each one as well?
Well, yeah. Well, what is if someone hears metabolic health? The first question they probably think is, what does that even mean?
So, metabolic health? Yeah. So metabolic health just talks about how, for me, it's how good you are at handling sort of the energy you're taking in, and then what you're able to do with it as well. So when we look at it, we're talking about kind of how you're handling the sugars like glucose, how you're handling fats, and what's going on with your sort of lipid metabolism as well. So like cholesterol and stuff. So in that, we've included HbA1c, which is a kind of a crude measurement of how high your sugars have been over a period of sort of 3 months. So HbA1c measures glycated hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is a protein that's found in your red blood cells. It's what's responsible for carrying oxygen. When it's exposed to glucose in the blood, it becomes glycated. So glucose molecule attaches to it. And then because it's kind of a pretty permanent attachment, you can measure that in when you do a blood draw. And because red blood cells have a lifespan of sort of 120 days, it sort of gives you that 2 to 3 months, like a 3-month measure of where your sugars have been over that time, right? And the higher your HbA1c, the more sugars have been floating around in your blood. Okay. So we're measuring HbA1c, and actually it's used to diagnose things like diabetes and pre-diabetes as well. If people have ability to get this lab done, then I've also asked for fasting glucose and a fasting insulin. So these 2 values taken together can give you something called HOMO-IR, which is a homeostatic assessment of insulin resistance, basically. So it kind of tells us just how insulin resistant someone is as well. Yeah. The HOMO-IR. So it stands for homeostatic model assessment of insulin resistance. So that's what the HOMO-AIR rather.
And let's say these markers are high, like we're covering the sort of sugars ones, right? If you've got high sugars, just speaking very broadly, if you've got high sugars, why is this bad, and what is this going to do to you in the long term if you don't change this?
Yeah, so having high glucose in the blood means that your cells the other cells are exposed to this high sugar all the time, and that is damaging to the cells essentially. Okay, so it will disrupt the sort of lining of the cell walls, the endothelium. It can lead to inflammation, oxidative stress and damage. It can lead to kind of plaque formation. It basically speeds up the whole process that leads to things like plaque formation and things as well. Yeah.
Why is that bad? Well, why is plaque formation bad?
So plaque formation on your blood vessels is bad because then you get narrowing of those blood vessels, and over time, depending on where that blood vessel is, you can either get a heart attack if it's in the heart. If it's in the brain, you can have strokes or mini strokes. It can even reduce the kind of blood flow to the rest of the brain. So even without a stroke or a mini stroke, you could be getting kind of low level reduction in oxygen delivery to your brain, reduction in nutrient delivery to your brain, and it can actually lead to an earlier development of things like dementia as well, and cognitive decline. So it's sugars, and having them in a good like kind of control is so broad. It affects every part of the human body. You know, the brain, the heart, the eyes, the kidneys, the vasculature in the legs, the nerves, everywhere. Pretty much, it even increases the risk of things like cancer. So insulin resistance is huge. Yeah. So we want people to, when they're eating, to be as insulin sensitive as possible, really. Yeah. And that's why diabetes is such a huge problem. And people don't quite realize it, especially in the South Asian community. People just go, "Oh, I'm diabetic," and they say it like it's a throwaway comment. I remember at university, I remember a lecturer actually saying that, and this sounds really extreme, but actually he said a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, which is not well controlled, is worse than a diagnosis in this day and age of HIV. And I remember hearing that, and I was like, "Did he just say that?" Like, it stuck with me. Look, I'm still saying it today because it stuck with me. But the reason he said that is because if someone gets diagnosed with HIV, we're going off topic here, but they get given a medication to kind of help control that virus, so the virus can't replicate. It doesn't affect your immune system as badly, and then you can essentially live. People don't die of HIV; they die of AIDS, so they die of the immune system going down and stuff. But in this day and age, we have good medicines for that. With diabetes, while we have good medicines, if they're not working and people's sugars are staying high, it affects everywhere. Like it just runs rampant all over, increases the risk of heart attacks, strokes, neurological damage, leads to things like amputations, all sorts. It's horrible, right?
Do you think it's too normal? Like people just think, "Oh, you got diabetes." Yeah. "Oh, yeah, cool, it's diabetes." You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just so normalized that
it's like people inevitably.
Yeah, cholesterol's become so normalized that pretty much everyone is walking around with probably raised cholesterol, and that's why heart disease is the biggest killer of man. If you look at the top 10 kind of killers, heart attack. So ischemic heart disease is top, strokes are second, and after that it's sort of like your cancers and things, and some respiratory disorders. But then 7, 8, and 9 are your Alzheimer's dementia, which has a insulin resistance component to it a little bit. It's also got a genetic component. Then it's diabetes and diabetes-related complications. And then it's kidney disease, which stems from things like high blood pressure. And again, diabetes. Most kidney disease is caused by those too. So all of these has huge cardiometabolic kind of risk factors and stuff. So it's just wild to me that we've sort of normalized it. So I think, yeah, testing, going back to the topic, testing HbA1c and testing insulin resistance is hugely important. And that's why we've included that as part of the metabolic panel. The second part of the metabolic panel is your cholesterol, so lipid breakdown. So we've asked for like your total cholesterol, your non-HDL, your LDL, triglycerides. If people can get ApoB tested, then that's better. And if they can get a one-off test of LP(a), then that's great. But we've not included that in our kind of scoring system. And I'll kind of explain what these are kind of quickly anyway. So when we're measuring these cholesterol, we're not actually measuring cholesterol itself. Cholesterol itself is just a type of fat that is transported around the body, right? It needs to go from place A to place B. But the problem with transporting fat in the blood is that the blood is kind of sort of really low level. It's water based, and fat and water don't mix, right? So it won't be able to travel easily. So it needs to get packaged. And the way the body packages fats, like cholesterol and triglycerides and things like that, is in these things called lipoproteins, right? So they're like a casing, if you will, yeah. And there's different types of these casings that carry different fat packages, and LDL is a low density lipoprotein. It's a type of package, yeah. And HDL, or high density lipoprotein, is a type of package as well. And there's loads of different categories of different non-HDL lipoproteins and packages, and then LDL is one type as well. So the reason we care about these is because when LDL is high, when this type of package is high in the blood, we see it's causative in causing atherosclerosis, so the plaque buildup in the arteries. Yeah. So if you imagine that there's too many of these LDLs carrying cholesterol around, it's actually the LDL that's allowing the buildup of this plaque in the blood vessels, right? And if we control that and we bring the LDL down, we get less plaque formation. Similarly, HDL, which is the good cholesterol, everyone calls it that, and I do that because there is no such thing as good bad cholesterol. It's just depends on the how much there is in the system, right? So even with HDL, we see that they actually can help remove the fat away from the blood vessels, but it's a U-shaped curve, right? So if your HDL is too low, then you're at risk. Then you get like a Goldilocks zone where actually that level of HDL is quite good, but then too high in HDL is also associated with some risk, okay? So we don't want people to have really, really, really high HDL levels. It's not that protective. And previously it was thought that if your HDL was high and your LDL was high, you were fine because your HDL is okay. But that's no longer the school of thought. The school of thought now is you want the HDL in a good range, yes, but you also want the LDL nice and kind of kept low. And not just LDL. The reason I said ApoB is because ApoB stands for apolipoprotein B. So this is a protein that's found on these lipoproteins. And it's found on LDLs, VLDLs, IDLs, basically anything that's not a HDL is found on those. So it's a better marker of disease risk because it's the apolipoprotein B containing lipoproteins that can cause the damage to the plaques and stuff like that, to the vessels, and cause plaque buildup. So measuring ApoB or non-HDL is what I would recommend, and that's what's in our scoring system as well. But we've used LDL as well because if your LDL is high, sometimes you can have something called discordance, so you want the LDL to measure as well. So frankly put, it really kind of going back to why we're measuring it, it's important because if your LDL or non-HDL or ApoB are high, you have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, and the biggest killer of man is cardiovascular disease. And not only that, it also leads to or increases the risk of things like dementia, cognitive decline as well. So yeah, that's probably the reason. That's our metabolic panel basically. The other thing after that was sort of measure inflammation we did. So
well, just before we go into inflammation, just to confirm, so metabolic health, we've got two key areas. We've got effectively diabetic risk or anything to do with sugars, the role of insulin resistance on some of the other medical conditions, and then we've got the lipid profiles. So sugars and lipids, and those different panels make up the metabolic health system. And based on our scoring system, so your BioHealth score, metabolic health has the biggest weighting of all of it. You just talk about why that's the most. All five are important, but why is metabolic health like the most? Has the biggest weight on your score here? Like, is it? What's the reason behind that?
I mean, I think it's the biggest predictor of health and disease risk, isn't it? Like when we're talking about kind of chronic diseases that affect people as we get older. In that top 10, as I mentioned, the main ones are ischemic heart disease. Ischemic heart disease is literally fueled by insulin resistance and elevated ApoB and non-HDL cholesterol. In the absence of insulin resistance and in the absence of a raised non-HDL cholesterol, we hardly see atherosclerosis. We hardly see it, right? So if you can control for those two early on, then you're doing the best thing you can to reduce your risk of the biggest killer of man, essentially. So it's got to have a huge weighting there, right?
And also, we can have the biggest impact on that as well with
exactly.
lifestyle intervention.
Exactly. So things like pre-diabetes, even diabetes as well, if they're caught early enough, we can actually put them into remission as well through healthy lifestyle things. So like losing body fat, increasing muscle mass as well. And that's why and to me as well, poor glucose control or like insulin resistance, which happens probably around the time someone's becoming pre-diabetic as well, that time period is quite long, right? So before someone gets diagnosed with diabetes, they would have been pre-diabetic or insulin resistant for years. Yeah, it's like probably 10 years, maybe more, right?
Really?
Before they were diagnosed. And it's thought that a lot of the damage that happens because of insulin resistance in the body, like in the vessels, like in the eyes, the kidneys and everywhere, that damage is being done in those years before you get diagnosed as diabetic. So when you get diagnosed as diabetic, a lot of the damage has been done, right? And then you get diagnosed as diabetic, and your doctor goes, "Whoa, we better put you on those medications now. Let's get the metformin in. Let's you need to speak to someone about getting your diet sorted. All this. Why are we waiting? Why are we waiting when we can intervene early enough, right? Or we can either intervene early enough where we catch it, doing like a homo IR test. We can catch it early enough and go." I'm not saying that everyone that's slightly insulin resistant will become diabetic, by the way. Yeah. So not everyone that has insulin resistance become diabetic. Obviously not. There'll be some people that just stay a bit insulin resistant their whole life, but they're getting damage done. So if we can intervene early enough, get that blood test done early enough, and say, look, you're here at this point. Let's put the right lifestyle measures in place. Let's get you, as lean as we can for your body in a healthy way, and get you some muscle as well, because we know muscle is the biggest sink for glucose. Yeah, apart from the liver, our muscles take in glucose and store it as glycogen, right? So if you're eating, I always used to joke that we train so we can eat freely, yeah. And you talk about it as well in the consolidation phase, right? And just after the consolidation phase, actually not in consolidation phase, but in the reward phase. The reward phase is, you're able to enjoy the fruits of your labor a bit more. You can be a little bit more relaxed every now and then, not worry about having that burger or having that ice cream or having that dessert, because you want to enjoy life. Yeah. We don't want to tell people, oh my God, you're going to get diabetes, don't eat any ice cream. Like, that's crazy. There's no way to live. But you want to be in a place where you're metabolically healthy enough that doing stuff like that is just like, it's cool. I'm all right. This is not going to harm me in the long run, because your body is now built to be able to take that sort of minimal kind of stress, right? It's a minimal stress on the body. And we want to get people there. And if we intervene early enough and get people healthy enough, then they can enjoy their lives without worrying. And that's why, like, I always tell people, like, look, people think I'm depriving myself by not having this stuff. I'm like, look, I have it. I enjoy it when I want, but I know when to, and I know that if I do it every day, then I run the risk of actually my metabolic health deteriorating. And then I can no longer enjoy this stuff, because when you're insulin resistant, you eat something, it's got sugar, your blood sugar rises, your cells don't respond to that rise in blood sugar. They kind of go, the insulin goes up, but your cells don't respond to it. So the sugar just stays in the blood, and then you get the damage over time. So we want to intervene early enough. And that's why I've put metabolic health as the biggest weighting in our scoring system.
What sort of body fat percentage do you think is a good place to maintain? There's no number, right? What sort of range do you think, when people are saying, when they're hearing lean, what are you referring to here? Like,
there's no number. So
you stay pretty lean, right? Is that too lean? Is that right? Is it right for you? Like, what's the?
Good question. Right for you is exactly what you said, right? So everyone has, and this is working on kind of theories from Professor, like Dr. Roy Taylor, who's like a giant in the type 2 diabetes world. He has this hypothesis that everyone has their own personal fat threshold, right? Why does everyone that is obese not develop type 2 diabetes? They don't, right? They don't. This is fact. Yeah. Not everyone that's obese will develop type 2 diabetes, because everyone has a personal fat threshold at which they will see damage being done, right? Not everyone that has extra body weight is metabolically unhealthy as well, which may seem like a shock to people listening. Just because you have extra body weight and extra adipose doesn't mean you're automatically metabolically unhealthy, right?
Yeah.
So not everyone who is in the obese range by body fat percentage is unhealthy. It's true. Yeah. And they may live to never have any problems in the sequence of it. But on the whole, if we generalize, we know that when individuals do have excess body fat for that individual, they will have some of the consequences of poor metabolic health, like insulin resistance and things like that. So I can never give a number. I don't like to give a number on how lean. And I think it's pointless as well. I think we need to. We're trying to individualize care, right? So if I give a number and someone goes, "Oh yeah, if I get to that percentage, I'm good," they might not be. And it might be too much for them. They might start feeling like absolute crap getting that lean. There's some people that can walk around shredded and absolutely fine. I don't know how they do it, because if I get absolutely shredded, I know that I get weaker in the gym.
You are shredded.
Yeah, you know what I mean, though, right? Like I'm beach ready, not photo shoot ready, right? But
You're
there's some
always
people,
beach ready. Yeah,
but there's some people that are photo shoot ready and stuff, and that can walk around. And to be honest, look, and I have a six pack because I like having a six pack, right? Let's get this straight. Not everyone has to have a six pack. We want our clients to just be happy with how they look, and we also want them to be healthy and feel good.
I'm happy to speak openly about my biohealth score because maybe we bring this in the interpretation section. Yeah. So I'm due another one this year, and I think it's going to be really interesting. And maybe we do another one after my most recent one, because you said it'll be interesting to see another year of like just being plant-based, what that does. But obviously we talked about the cholesterol flag, but then you also said to me your HbA1c it's not bad, but it's not amazing. And now I look at that and think, damn, like those are the two biggest metabolic health drivers. I'm someone who's in decent shape. Should I be getting leaner? Because once you did say to me once, you said maybe you need to look at being a little bit leaner year round. Maybe that's you just got to be a little bit leaner in order to keep that bit right. Is that what you're referring to here?
It may not necessarily even be that. Like I don't know. Like before that blood test was done, 3 months prior to that, how were you eating during that time? Were you in a phase where you were trying to gain weight? And we know we're going to be in a calorie excess during that time.
No.
And we don't know. When was it? It's 2000. No,
right?
The most
recent one. Yeah, the most recent was last summer, July 24. Yeah.
So were you weren't in a calorie excess? You weren't doing anything that could be raising.
No, maintaining body weight.
Were you running a lot?
I think at that point I was running maybe twice a week, not a huge amount. So it'd be interesting to see this year. Like obviously there's a lot more running now. Yeah. So
I mean, we're talking about your number. It wasn't that bad, right? It was still in the normal range. Like you weren't anywhere. You weren't pre-diabetic. let's put that out there. You were in the normal range. There's a difference between like optimal, where we see the lowest risk.
Yeah.
Then there's a difference between normal range. We don't see much risk. You're probably fine. But then it's approaching the area where, okay, actually, this is where we need to be careful. Annual testing. You're not pre-diabetic, but we need to just be a bit careful, right? And you may stay in that for a while, and that's still not insulin resistant, right? Your fasting glucose might be fine. Your fasting insulin might be fine, right? Remember, we only did your HbA1c. For your scoring, we didn't get everything. We haven't got all the data, which is why I think using HbA1c alone is great for diagnosing pre-diabetes and diabetes, yeah? But it's not great for diagnosing insulin resistance, yeah? Does that make sense? Because this is why I needed
BioHealth last year.
Yeah, because you can have a normal HbA1c, and actually the fasting insulin and the fasting glucose be slightly raised, and that might raise alarm bells. And that's why I'm saying those tests are quite important, but they're not used in every day because, like I said, we're not set up on especially on the NHS. It will cost a lot of money doing all these tests for people, and then create a lot more downstream consequence of these blood tests, which I think we're not set up to handle. Whereas in a more controlled setting, if people get these tests done and we know we're going to be actually intervening and doing things with very motivated people, that's fine. But general population wise, mate, if I was testing everyone's insulin resistance levels that came into my practice, I would never have time to do anything else. We barely have time to even do cholesterol management in GP practices. We've outsourced it to pharmacists now. It's not even handled by GPs anymore. Patients get annoyed that they can't speak to their doctor about their cholesterol. Well, because we've got so much other stuff to do and we just haven't got the capacity. So I think don't be too alarmed by your HbA1c result. It's in the normal range. I would suggest getting the fasting glucose and fasting insulin to see where you're really at, and that's it. Go from there.
Yeah, we do another test soon. Yeah. So let's go into inflammation then. So cover metabolic health. Yeah. Let's go into the next core testing area, inflammation. Yeah. What is inflammation? Why is it important? If it's too high, why is it bad?
Yeah. So
what's it going to do to you?
Yeah, I mean, so inflammation is one of those things where if you've got low level inflammation, then it's sort of, having negative effects around the body, even without you realizing. And that's why we're saying if you get tested on CRP, so which is just a acute phase protein that goes up during inflammation, right? I know inflammation might sound like a bit of a buzzword to a lot of people as well. It's sort of been thrown around a lot. I see it all the time on Instagram. I'm not really on TikTok, but people send me videos. So I see, inflammation, you need to do this, take the supplement to combat inflammation, inflammation. So it's thrown around a lot, right? And inflammation itself is just how the body reacts to stress. So it could be infection, it could be an injury. You get an acute sharp rise of inflammation. You release all these we call pro-inflammatory compounds. They're called cytokines, but compounds. And it handles the stress and it repairs the body. Yeah. So a little bit of that stress every now and then is fine because it actually helps the body's repair systems and things like that, right? But it's the chronic levels of inflammation which is damaging, because if you've got low level inflammation all the time and these processes are switched on all the time, then they're also going to be causing a bit of collateral damage to other areas or other cells, and you get chronic tissue damage as well. And this is how some of the chronic diseases do develop. It contributes to things like insulin resistance, cholesterol metabolism and regulation. It can drive atherosclerosis in your blood vessels, and we know that chronic inflammation is linked to like premature mortality, so premature death as well. So we want to make sure that people are free from this chronic levels of inflammation. And one way of measuring it is doing a CRP blood test. And the other one is homocysteine as well. So both of these are kind of inflammatory biomarkers. There's loads more as well. But we chose these two because, again, both of them are very, CRP is just very easy to test. You can get it anywhere really. But the homocysteine as well is very sensitive to metabolic damage as well.
And so how does reducing inflammation accelerate transformation? Yeah, I hear all the time like, oh, I'm probably too inflamed, or I've been inflamed last week, and that's why. Yeah, it's just people use it as a way to describe themselves. But and maybe 10 years ago we probably did the same. But why does reducing inflammation actually accelerate transformation, like bringing these CRP and homocysteine levels in check?
Yeah, well, you're not artificially trying to bring those biomarkers down, but you're trying to create an environment where the body is at its best, right? So the body is not going to be at its best when it's chronically inflamed and trying to put out all these fires, right? It's already trying to do too much, which is why like training too much and overtraining can lead to this kind of chronic stress as well, and chronic inflammation, and can hinder a transformation, right? And you know that better than anyone, right? So you want to create an environment which brings down the inflammation. You can measure it before and after to see if you've succeeded in creating that environment. And then, of course, your body will then respond by doing things like building more muscle, losing body fat, and all these things. When you're chronically inflamed, you're finding it more difficult to partition the energy that you're using properly. You're going to find it difficult to build muscle. You're going to find it more difficult to burn body fat, because inflammation is kind of sort of suppressing or blocking a lot of the activity that is required to do that in a sustained and positive way. So I think it's almost like you want to create, as I said, you want to create an environment that reduces inflammation, because that same environment is going to be what's fruitful for a positive transformation, because it will accelerate muscle building and accelerate fat loss as well.
Okay, so is it? We joke about our Garmin stress scores. Is that? Yeah, and it's usually linked to being, overtraining, or you're feeling sick or anything like that. Is that?
Or you telling me to check my watch all the time? That's what it is.
Yeah,
you telling me, how stressed are you? How stressed are you?
Is that the same thing, or is it completely different?
Nah, so they were. There's probably a correlation, right, between they're looking more like your heart rate variability and your respiratory rate and your resting heart rate and things like that. So yeah, physically, it's a link, right? There is going to be physical parameters that will alter, which the watch measures, between what's going on inside your body as well. If you're in a chronic state of stress, you've got this, they call it inflammatory tone, or sympathetic tone as well, is a different way, but which is the stress tone, but inflammatory tone as well, where there's this low level of chronic inflammation, like the inflammatory markers are just a bit high, which means everything around the body is just not working as it should. And the body is very clever. It senses that, heart rate goes up, and then you feel that as well. You don't feel as good. You don't feel right. So yeah, like you're not fine tuned in that way. And I think when we're looking at our watches and we're looking at our stress scores, that's more to do with that physical aspect of it. And who knows, at that point when your stress is really high, if we were to do a blood draw, would the inflammatory markers be up? Potentially. I mean, it's usually during like an illness. Like your stress score tends to go up when you're exposed to viruses from your daughter, right? So you've got a cold, you're sniffling and all that stuff. You're not getting good sleep. Yeah, your heart rate variability goes up, your resting heart rate goes up. Your watch tells you you're stressed. But at that time, you're also fighting a bit of a cold. So you can see how those kind of go hand in hand.
What is heart rate variability? You know, it's another buzzword. People love looking at their HRV. I don't know if the Garmin does it. Well, my version doesn't do it. I think yours might because it's more updated. But you know, you got the Whoop that do this like.
Yeah, the Whoop does it. Mine doesn't actually do it. Mine doesn't do it.
Yeah, it just depends on the Garmin model. But what is HRV, and like, is it something you need to worry about? Is it something worth trying to optimize? Like, what's the whole deal? Is it another buzzword?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things where if you've got a lower heart rate variability, then you're kind of it's linked to kind of stress or some health issues. I don't want to speak above my knowledge base here, where I've never really looked into the literature on heart rate variability, because it's one of those things where I don't look at it because it's not on my watch, and I've only focused on like kind of resting heart rate, and I know resting heart rate is related to kind of better performance and longevity outcomes. But yeah, heart rate variability is just the sort of fluctuations of the time interval between heartbeats. Yeah, so it's a measure of like your heart's rhythm. That's all it is really. And if you've got a higher variability, it's linked to sort of overall health and performance. And if you've got lower variability, then it's indicator of stress or health issues. That's all it really is.
Okay, so we covered inflammation. Let's go into kidney and liver function. Why is this a testing area for discovering your biohealth score?
Yeah, so liver and kidney are two incredibly important organs. So you've got two kidneys, obviously. So both kidneys and the liver are incredibly important organs for your sort of overall health and metabolic function as well. Reason being is because they've sort of got a reciprocal relationship as well, right? So if you've got poor liver health, then that disrupts your metabolic function. And if you've got poor metabolic function, that also disrupts the liver health. So there's like a circle going on there. Similarly with the kidneys, if you've got like high blood pressure or insulin resistance, that can damage the kidneys. If the kidneys are damaged, that then further fuels a fire for, raised blood pressure. You get so toxins building up in the body because the kidneys are in charge of sort of filtering out things as well. And if your kidneys aren't functioning properly, you get a buildup of certain things in the body, which then also has metabolic side effects as well. So making sure that the liver and the kidneys are functioning optimally has to be part of your overall sort of metabolic health as well, because of that in such close relationship. So if we just look at the liver first of all, one of the ways that poor metabolic health manifests itself is something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You may have heard of it. Everyone just says fatty liver. It's sort of being renamed and rebranded as such as well, to be called like metabolically associated steatohepatitis. Which steatohepatitis just means fat deposition in the liver and inflammation of the liver. Whereas we say metabolically associated because it is metabolically associated and it sounds less kind of stigmatizing than just saying fatty liver. Fatty liver just doesn't sound very professional or good, to be honest with you. And also to create that metabolic link, we've moved away from calling it non-alcoholic liver fatty disease. So before it's called that because, as I said to you, years ago, when we saw someone with fatty liver disease, it was kind of just assumed that they were drinking a lot of alcohol, because that's what tends to happen. So when you drink a lot of alcohol, or in the case of non-alcoholic, when you eat excess calories, fat sort of builds up in the liver tissue. And if you get a lot of fat depositing in the liver tissue, you no longer have proper functioning of the liver cells, of the hepatocytes, and liver is incredibly important, as I said, for glucose metabolism as well, because it's a storage of site of glycogen. So it helps to control the outflow of glucose into the blood to keep it in a good range. So it's very responsive to insulin. And it also helps with cholesterol metabolism as well, because that's the site where you get the development of these lipoproteins that carry and package the cholesterol. It's all happening in the liver. Yeah, so the liver is incredibly important. So if you've got poor liver health, then you can imagine that you're less sensitive to insulin as well. If you're less sensitive to insulin, then what happens when you get glucose in the blood? Glucose stays high, insulin's going up, but the liver's not responding to it to shuttle in the glucose. So glucose just stays high in the body, it's causing its damage everywhere else. Similarly, if the liver is not functioning properly when it comes to like cholesterol packaging and metabolism, it's not being regulated properly, your LDL cholesterol can rise as well, which is why measuring these biomarkers will give you a good idea of how well the liver is functioning. And then the kidneys, so they're important for, as I said, filtering and stuff, but when you've got high blood pressure or insulin resistance, remember what I told you, both of these can damage the blood vessels and they damage the small blood vessels. And the kidneys are amongst the most sort of vascular tissue in the body. They get a significant portion of blood flow is directed to the kidneys so they can keep filtering. They're literally clockwork 24/7. They're filtering all the time. They're filtering the blood, which means that these small blood vessels are very they're at risk, right? If you've got very small vessels, they're at risk of changes in pressure. They're at risk of things like plaque deposition, things like that. If that's happening over time, we see a decline in blood flow to the areas of the kidneys that are causing the filtering, and then a decline in kidney function. So recognizing the kidney function by doing these blood tests well ahead of time allows you to sort of catch if there's something else going on in the body as well, right? So in every patient that has high blood pressure or high cholesterol, we also measure their kidney function every single year. And in patients that have chronic kidney disease, we make sure that they're on something to bring their cholesterol into like a really low range, so we can reduce the decline in kidney damage. Because over time, if the kidneys get more and more damaged, you then develop the symptoms of kidney failure. So, puffy legs, puffy face, swelling, buildup of these harmful metabolites in the body, which are destructive in their own way. And then eventually, if the kidneys aren't working properly, you get massive electrolyte imbalances. You end up needing to, and at the end stage, kidney failure, go on dialysis and things, right? So it's not a good way to go. And in the top 10 killers of man, I think renal disease was 10th. So it's important to get well ahead of it and see where your kidney function is sort of in your 30s, 40s. Because if you've got signs of kidney damage that early on, then that should be alarm bells. I need to make changes now to make sure my blood pressure stays in a good range, to make sure my cholesterol stays in a good range, to prevent further decline in kidney function. That makes sense?
Yeah. Isn't it crazy how like everything comes downstream of effectively managing your body composition and your day-to-day lifestyle? Like all these things you're mentioning, it's just like, take the holistic overview.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do in your control is managing body composition, what you put in your mouth, how you live your life, which lifestyle, obviously is not an easy thing to do. And it's the reason why companies like us exist. But it's amazing how like widespread these benefits beyond just looking great can do. Like you get that one thing in order, everything else just you're setting yourself up for the best possible chance for a long quality life. I think that's important to say, not just a long life, but a quality life.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Everyone talks about lifespan, but we're in the business of caring about health span. How many years are you going to spend in good quality of life? And that is literally what healthy aging is about. So that's another one of my interests as well. Healthy aging. How can we make sure that because people are living longer lives, right? Like we're going to see the first people that are living well, there's people living over 100 anyway, but we're going to see a lot more people living over 100. But we want to see them living to that age in a healthy way. So when you're in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, like people are working until later as well, right? So you want to remain functional to be able to enjoy life. If you're retiring if you're retiring at an older age and all of these things, you don't want to spend your retirement years disease-ridden, where because you haven't looked after things earlier on when you could have, you've now got illnesses that leave you sort of housebound or dysfunctional, really frail, reliant on things like reliant on medications, reliant on dialysis, and all these things. And it's not a good way to go. Like I see it every day in my patients. I feel so bad for them because there's lots of different reasons why they're there. You can't just blame the fact that they didn't have a good lifestyle. There's lots of social determinants of health that play into it as well, which is why wealthier people tend to do a bit better, because wealthier people tend to be able to afford earlier testing. They tend to be able to afford living a better lifestyle as well, and then they live longer and healthier lives. We just see that, whereas people that don't have as much wealth tend to survive on easy foods because that's the situation they're in, and eventually they do develop these chronic diseases, which then leads to a shorter lifespan and a shorter health span.
Well, you see it as well. Like if you're growing up in poverty, for example, you're living in poverty, you're not going to be worried about your biomarkers or your health. You're just trying to get through the day, right? And you're trying to make money to put food on the table. So
exactly,
something like this whole discussion is very much you're doing it from a place of a lot of my needs are already met from a day-to-day perspective. How do I now optimize the rest of my life?
Exactly.
So there is definitely a segment or population, I don't know what the right way to say it is, but this sort of stuff is very targeted at a specific type of population.
Yeah.
Oh, you mentioned around function and being able to function. So it kind of segues nicely into the next core testing area, which is actually not related to blood markers, but physical.
We skip one though.
Yeah, we've got nutrient status. So you want to do that one first? Okay, go and do nutrient status first.
I think we should. I think we should get all the blood
physical
stuff done first. So yeah, nutrition and hydration status I put there as well. Essentially, because a lot of people that feel kind of tired, fatigue, and things like that, they're usually not supplementing vitamin D. Another buzzword that's come out as well, like everyone's on about like supplementing really super high dose of vitamin D and all this stuff. Vitamin D is not the panacea for health, but it is important, right? You need to have your vitamin D in a good range, which is difficult to do if you're, of a certain complexion and you're not getting access to good sunlight. So if you're, again, a South Asian person living in places like the UK, where we get barely any sunlight, your chances are your vitamin D is going to be low. And vitamin D is an incredibly important hormone. Actually behaves like a hormone in the body, not strictly a vitamin, but it behaves like a hormone, which is really important in the immune function, but also bone health and bone metabolism as well. So if your vitamin D levels are low, then you run the risk of having kind of more weaker bone, things like something called osteopenia, and then eventually it can lead to things like osteoporosis as well. But as well, you'll see that people, have low vitamin D will feel tired, fatigued. They may be getting coughs and colds more often as well. Yeah, so there's more function than just the bone health. It's actually important in muscle health as well. Actually, so if you have low vitamin D, then you're not going to be in the best state to put on muscle as well, which a lot of people don't recognize. So I think testing that is one part of it, just because it tells me overall, are you getting good sunlight? Are you supplementing vitamin D well? And then all the other nutrient factors as well. So we've got folate in there. So folate is found in a lot of leafy green vegetables. So it just really tells me, are you eating a nice varied diet and not kind of starving yourself or eating a restricted dietary pattern? Because if you are, then your folate levels are likely going to be off. B12, incredibly important. So B12 is a cofactor that's kind of used in sort of DNA regulation. It's important for building healthy red blood cells as well. If you've got vitamin D, B12 deficiency, you can run the risk of developing a type of anemia where your red blood cells get quite big and they're not able to carry the right amount of oxygen, and then it leaves you feeling fatigued and things. But so we want to make sure that B12 stays in a good range. In deficiency as well, you get issues with sort of the myelin sheaths, the sheaths that cover your nerves as well. So you can get like quite bad nerve damage as well in people with low vitamin B12, and even with low folate as well. So you want to make sure that these numbers are in a good range, because that just tells me, are you eating right? Are you supplementing where you need to? And obviously, if you're eating a restricted dietary pattern, so if you're vegan, vegetarian, then likely you may not be getting B12 from your food, unless you're having fortified foods. So it's good to always know where you're at, because you may be eating that dietary pattern for ethical reasons or even for health reasons, because it's linked to better heart disease risk and things like that. But if you're not supplementing B12, then you're running the risk of other things. So I think it's a good idea to make sure we supplement those.
Just on that, it's almost like from what you're saying, understanding your nutritional status helps avoid sort of shooting in the dark when it comes to supplementation. Is that correct?
Yeah, but again, at the same time, we can't test every single mineral and vitamin and biomarker. When people come to see me, they always want to test for all their vitamins, and I just look at them like, I can't even request a vitamin C test, so no, I can't do that, but I can test vitamin B12, vitamin D, and folate. And
the most important ones.
Yeah, most important, but also they give you a good estimation of what this person's eating like. Because if someone's low in folate and B12, then something is going on usually. And when you do dig deeper into what the dietary pattern they have, usually they're just eating a load of processed foods and they're not eating enough vegetables and greens, which is why their folate is low. But B12, even omnivores, like 50% of adults in America are deficient in B12, despite eating so many animal products. So it's just one of those things where we need to make sure that we're checking. Yeah. And then with the with what we're talking about. We're talking about B12,
Well,
folate.
just general nutritional status. So we don't need to go
Yeah,
into every single vitamin.
yeah, fine.
That's a
Yeah, yeah,
podcast in itself.
yeah, yeah.
Just from
True,
like a high
true.
level perspective, would you say those three
Yeah,
are
yeah,
like the
yeah.
big ones too? They
Yeah,
tell you.
and ferritin tells you about your iron status, basically. So if it's too low, then you're running the risk of becoming iron deficient, and then you could become anemic. One thing we're not testing for is we're not testing for anemia. We're not checking people's full blood count. So we're not checking their white blood cells, their full blood count, all of that stuff, because to me, they're not really linked to metabolic health. They're more linked to your overall health and should be tested and acted upon by your clinician, right? So we're not here to become the doctors for RNT clients. Yeah, that is not what this is. We're here just to provide education on their blood markers and their biomarkers and link it to their fitness and transformation journey. And I guess we're dwelling into their metabolic health more than anything else. We're not here to kind of diagnose anemia or diagnose like a hormonal problem or anything like that as well. So yeah, just to kind of put it out there.
Yeah, it's important
Yeah.
because it's very easy to sort of masquerade as like, oh yeah, this is these are the doctors for clients. It doesn't make any that doesn't work. But also a lot of these. Well, I think we'll save it for the next part. Just like why, testing all these blood markers can kind of can create a lot of anxiety. But maybe touch on hormones actually, because that's an interesting one. You know, we were debating on that quite a bit. But why are we not looking at hormones in biohealth?
Yeah, so that's it's a good question, and I think you asked me as well when we're coming up with what markers we're going to test. So, I guess when we're talking about hormone testing, is again hormones have become a huge buzzword. Everyone on Instagram is a hormone expert now, despite having no medical training at all. They're a hormone expert. The real hormone experts are endocrinologists, and usually people that have done like a special training in kind of menopause and things as well. There'll be women's hormone experts, and then there'll be andrologists or urologists that are experts in testosterone, right? And these are the people that really are the experts in hormones, not people that we see online. Everyone wants to know about their hormones and what their hormones are doing, and that's completely fair enough. I think hormones are very important, but there's clinical reasons and clinical indications where people should be getting their hormones checked. But the levels as well of what the hormones will come back on a blood draw are really dynamic, right? They fluctuate based on the time of day that you do the blood draw, whether someone's got an infection at the time, what stress they're under, how their sleep is. If it's women, what part of the menstrual cycle they're in. So even measuring at a certain day, you'll have a completely different result to 15 days in and at day 21, like because of the fluctuations in progesterone and estrogen during that time, and FSH and LH as well. So these are all the different hormones that you could test on a hormonal panel. If someone's going through the menopause as well, there'll be fluctuations in that as well. They might be on hormone medications, which in that case, that also can affect it. So a single sort of blood test to check for these hormones can be really misleading without taking into context the overall picture of a person, right? And then that will down the road lead to like increased anxiety as well. Like why, how is that going to affect your biohealth score, right? It's great to test, but if it's always going to fluctuate every time you have a blood test, it's not really going to give us a nice clean way of mapping your progress or in any way. You're gonna have to do repeat blood draws to see things, right? And I think it sounds great, but without a clear clinical reason to do it, it sort of just becomes expensive guesswork. Like I think when you had your blood test done, you got like a fasting testosterone done, and it was in the normal range, right? Great, cool, fine. Did you get it done again? What did you do with it? You just want to know if it's in the normal range. So if people want to do that, fine, go for it. But I don't think we're going to do anything with it. And personally as well, if someone came to me through RNT and let's say their thyroid hormone was off. Let's say they had too much T4 or too little T4, and their TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, let's say it was too high or too low. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to tell them to go speak to the physician, because actually this is a clinical medical thing that needs to be managed by their doctor. Their doctor knows them. They might be on thyroid medication, all of these things, right? So we're not here to sort of predict or give people a clinical assessment of their hormonal health issues. That's just not what we're here to do. And I think we need to be open about that and not just kind of test everything under the sun just because it's possible. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and also just like what can you actually have an impact on through the RNT journey?
Yeah,
Like
the RNT
hormones are
journey.
going to change all the time, aren't they? It's like let's say you're in the grind and you're in your photo shoot, hormones might not look that great, but let's say you're in your sweet
No, they
spot
won't.
in investment phase, they'll probably look pretty good. And but you could have had a stressful week and they might look bad. So there's too many factors and there's not much we can control. And I think the important point to mention here is that what we're going to try and do with BioHealth here is look at what is in your control to an extent. Like obviously the body is the body, right? But what can you have the most impact on, and what are the markers that actually make sense knowing the answers to, as opposed to just having, like you said, a 75-page report of 1,000 different biomarkers and you just don't know what to do with it, and it's just a lot of noise. Which maybe before we go into the physical assessment and the sort of fifth testing area, why don't we talk about this then? So, what makes BioHealth different from the typical blood test services? What's the problem with these 100, 200, 500 biomarker blood tests that are now on the market? And that seems to be the new thing. Like how many biomarkers can you actually test is like the biggest. It's like that seems to be the new flex now. So, what there's two parts to that question. What can you say on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to why we're not testing hormones, right? Like, just take you, for example. You had your blood test done by one of these blood testing services that tested all these bloods. Firstly, how was that service? Like, you had the blood test, they gave you a report, but then did you take any real action? Was there any sort of direction of what you should do? It was sort of directionless. If anything, you came to me for advice on what you should probably do and stuff, right? So, and then half the numbers, they might not make sense. Yes, they're explained in kind of nice writing and about what they are and stuff. Most of the markers that people will get tested are going to be in normal range anyway, right? And then if they are, then great, you don't need to worry about it, right? But then, and doing like these tests with 100 biomarkers, it all sounds really wonderful. A lot of them are still sort of in the early stages of research to see actually do they have any real world implications. Like with cholesterol and things, there's lots of tests that do kind of the size of the particles. They differentiate between the different size of lipoprotein particles that are carrying the cholesterol around. Does it have any sort of clinical correlation? I've tried looking into it. I can't see it or is, okay? But some people think there is, and we can charge loads of money for it, so let's just test it. It's kind of like that. Doing tumor markers and cancer markers sounds really nice. And as a overall health assessment for someone who's just worried about cancer and things, great, go get that test done if you really want. But actually, we don't even screen people for things like prostate cancer in this country, even though we've got a blood test that can sometimes help us in diagnosing people with prostate cancer. We don't use it as like you've hit 40 or you've hit 60 years old, go get this test done. We don't do that in this country. There's actually strict reasons why you would do a PSA blood test for prostate cancer. So if someone has symptoms or you are suspecting it, or there's a strong family history and all these other. But if someone says they want that test done as well, you have to tell them the risks and the benefits of having that blood test. And usually with blood tests like these, if you get a, let's say, false positive result, it leads to unnecessary stress, anxiety. It leads to downward investigations as well, some of which can be quite invasive. It can lead to sometimes a biopsy, which is very invasive. And then you can have the risks that are associated with doing an invasive procedure as well. So, and actually you might actually catch a prostate cancer, which might be really slow growing and never would have caused any problems until someone was in their late 90s, So it's very difficult to do like a scattergun kind of shotgun approach with all these biomarkers. Just say, boom, we can do all these tests. Let's just go for it. Because then you're sort of going, okay, now which one do we need to worry about? Which one shall we do? Like, it's just too much. And a lot of, you'll find that a lot of these places that offer these tests are hoping that the test is just completely normal, because an abnormal finding, even by a few points, creates a lot of stress and anxiety. So you have to be very,
okay.
Well, yeah, because people be like, why is it slightly out of range? Like, what now? What do I do? Okay, well, let's get you a full body MRI to find what's going on.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these companies are also quite new as well, right? They're new, they're well funded, they've got loads of money from investors. So as a result, it's got to sound sexy. Like you said, it probably hasn't been proven enough. Like I think I was speaking to a doctor in the US, and he was saying, I was talking about biohealth with him, and I was really happy to hear, and he's a client of ours, I was really happy to hear the first thing he said was, I hope you're not testing too many biomarkers. I was like, why is that? He's like, well, in the US, it's just going bonkers with biomarker testing. People are boasting how many tests they're testing. And he said it's just creating so much noise. And he's like, a lot of these companies, because a lot of them are VC backed, so they have a lot of money pumped in.
Yeah.
And he said a lot of these companies, he reckons they won't last long because it'll get the retention curve will be too low, but also the noise, they're riding the noise right now, the wave of the noise. But once people realize it's just noise, it will just flatline and disappear. So that was quite good to know from a fellow physician in the US who's also on the RNT journey.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's true. As in, like, we want to curate this so that we have selected the right things that we think we can influence through the RNT journey, right? We're not here to diagnose disease. We're not here to diagnose cancer. That's the job of a person's clinician. And it's between them and going to see a physician. If they have symptoms, they definitely should be seeing a physician. They're not sure. They shouldn't be coming to RNT with this is my result. I think I've got this. No, we're not here to replace the job of a doctor. That is not what this is. I'm not acting as anyone's doctor either. We're purely here to measure what we think is important for metabolic health, and then actually implementing that into their RNT plan with their coach. And these are actionable changes that will hopefully improve their disease risk for things like metabolic disease.
I'm a big fan of 80-20 in most parts of life. I think there's 20% of the results come from, 80% of the results come from 20% of the things you do. And I think it's the same thing here. If you look at, we're looking at around 27 to 32 different biomarkers, and it's probably around 20% of the ones that the majority of services are looking at. Most people are looking at anywhere between 100 and 250. We look at 27 to 32. And firstly, it's less overwhelming. But secondly, you can feel like you can take action on it. A friend of mine, I sent, we were doing some BioHealth scoring testing on the algorithm that we developed. And you said to me, have you got any more like people's data that we could use? So, I shared a friend of mine this morning, and he sent me a 75-page report that he got. First thing I said to him, so I was like, dude, how much did you read of this thing? Have you looked into it? He's like, I flicked through the first few pages, and then I just didn't know what was going on. Because whilst they say that they comes with the advice in the report, the problem is it's generic. It's algorithmically developed, but then you don't really know how to integrate it into your actual lifestyle. And I think why it works really well with RNT is because we're looking at your nutrition, your training, your sleep, hydration, etc., and we're in control, so to speak, of these different protocols. We can make manipulations or adjustments based on what we've seen. Now, they might not be massive. They might not be like, oh my God, this is like a complete overhaul. It shouldn't be, right? It shouldn't be. But it's the small tweaks that'll make a big difference. And this is what comes after the BioHealth score, then the consultation with yourself, and then it's the BioHealth integration where you work with the coach to make the slight adjustments based on the 5 core testing areas and the 27 to 32 biomarkers. So that's the spiel. And then maybe we'll just go on to the 5th core testing area, is the physical parameters. So the first 4 are blood-based. The 5th one, and this was something you actually brought to the table as a key thing when we're talking about longevity and anti-aging, not anti-aging, aging well.
Aging well,
sort of function later on in life. You said we should include physical measures. Could you talk about this and what it includes, why it's important?
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to make sure that, I think, I don't know what came into my head actually, but I was like, actually, you know what, when we're talking about, I think when you mentioned the word longevity to me, I started thinking about, well, what is actually longevity? Because that's another buzzword as well that's popped around everywhere as well. God, this whole podcast is full of buzzwords, isn't it? But real longevity to me is getting people to age well, and there's certain things that are associated with it, right? And there's certain markers that we can ask people to measure quite easily at home that don't require them to go to a fancy lab to have their VO2 max tested or things like that. Whilst I think VO2 max is a really important longevity physical metric, we're not asking people to test it because it's just not accessible. If they want to get it tested, then that's great, and then they can know. But for me, knowing what someone's blood pressure is like is really important. If they're in optimal blood pressure range, usually tells me that they're cardiovascularly fit. Usually, not always, but it also, when you have raised blood pressure, it's causing damage to blood vessels in the brain, blood vessels in the heart, blood vessels in the kidneys, blood vessels in the eyes. It is causing damage, when your blood pressure is high, because your blood vessel lining is very sensitive to changes in this pressure and things as well. So we want people to stay in that healthy blood pressure range. So asking people to measure it, asking people to measure their blood pressure is a really easy way to do that. Resting heart rate is another one. So we know that when people, resting heart rate should be anywhere between 60 and 100 in normal people. I don't know about you, but if my resting heart rate is anywhere near 100, I'd be worried, right? So resting heart rate,
as in overnight, sort of relax, overnight, sort of that sleep, or do you mean just more chilling?
Just when you're chilling. Yeah, I don't think anyone should be near there, right, at all.
According to my Garmin, anyway, 62. Yours was like 30.
Yeah, mine's less. Yeah, no. Right now you got me stressed out, man. It's 60 at the moment, so you got me stressed. Yeah, but but overnight, obviously, it drops to mine drops to 40, yours drops to about similar, right? So when you're not stressed out, but resting, so resting heart rate, if it's at the lower end, we see again it's associated with better cardiovascular outcomes as well, right? Because people tend to be more cardiovascularly fit if they've got a lower resting heart rate, and they're usually under less chronic stress as well. Whereas if you've got a higher resting heart rate, that is associated with greater levels of chronic stress and worse cardiovascular outcomes as well. And the biggest killer of man is cardiovascular disease. So we want to make sure people are fit in that way. So having a good resting heart rate is important. If your resting heart rate is too low as well, that can be an issue. So unless you're an athlete, like we are obviously, but unless you're an athlete, your resting heart rate shouldn't really be too low, and that can be a sign of like a conduction disorder in the heart as well. So I would be very cautious of people that are, they tell me that they're not very aerobically fit, but they come in and their resting heart rate is like in the 40s or 50s. I'd be wanting to actually investigate this further. They should be getting like an ECG with their clinician. Maybe we're getting referred to a cardiologist to see if they've got a conduction defect in their heart. But that's that's the general population. But people who are healthy otherwise, their resting heart rate should be kind of between 50 and I'd say 50 and 70 really. When you're approaching kind of 75, 80 and higher than that, that's where we start seeing disease risks sort of going up.
80s or 100 is
high.
I probably think I'm getting ill if I'm 80. Sitting.
Well, that's the thing. You'll notice that actually at times when you are sick and at times of stress, you look down at your watch, you're running a much higher heart rate, like awake time. And then in your sleep, you're running a much higher heart rate as well. And your average will go up to like 50 something. And you'll be like, oh God, what's going on? But remember, we're quite aerobically fit. Right, so you'd expect our resting heart rate to be better, and the reason is we've got a better resting heart rate is just because our cardiovascular system is more efficient. Like with every beat, we're getting enough blood pumped around, enough oxygen transfer is happening that the body doesn't need to rely on constantly more and more beats, basically. So per beat, we're more efficient, essentially. So that's why I think measuring that is a good thing for in the physical parameters. Next one is the waist to height ratio. So we didn't put BMI. People are free to share with us. I mean, they will be giving you their height and weight, data anyway. But waist to height ratio is sort of more sensitive to predicting metabolic risk than something like BMI for the reasons we spoke about earlier, because your body composition will affect that. If you've got a very big waist, chances are that you've got excess adipose tissue in the midriff around the organ, so your visceral body fat is probably going to be higher. And you're also going to have more subcutaneous body fat, and it's going to be around that midriff area as well, and tends to be that the higher, the higher the waist to height ratio, the more the risk is there. So measuring that is important. And then as people lose body fat and they get more leaner, they will reduce that number. The one leg stand test as well is what I put in. There's a few physical tests that are associated with frailty and longevity. So one leg stand test is quite easy to do. The average person should be able to stand on one leg for, I'd say, at least over 40 seconds. We've put over 30, but I'd say...
Is that with eyes open?
Yeah, eyes open. That is with eyes open, by the way. Yeah, because it's much harder with eyes closed anyway. Yeah. But with eyes open, you should be able to stand on one leg for at least over 30 seconds.
Eyes open is a great proprioception test and just general
eyes closed. Prehab. Eyes closed. You mean? Eyes closed.
Yeah, eyes closed. Yeah. So my running coach John, he recommends eyes closed, brushing your teeth, 10 seconds each leg as you're alternating as you go through it. It's really hard. but you really feel your feet muscles and your calf and everything working. To keep it balanced.
It's a good functional test of proprioception, balance, lower limb strength, and all these things are correlated again with improved health outcomes, reduced frailty, reduced risk of falling, all of these things. Because as we get older, these are the things that go up. You become less functional. You lose muscle because of sarcopenia, the age-related decline in muscle. Balance sort of goes, and you're at risk of falling. And if you fall, you're at high risk of fracture, and fracture has got a very high mortality rate in the first year. So a hip fracture anyway. So we want people to be able to do a one-leg stand test. And the reason it says over 30 seconds, because if you can do over 30 seconds, then your risk is going to be very low, right? So we expect people to score well on this, right? And if they're not scoring well on this, then really we should be asking why. So unless they've got sort of some physical issue that they have anyway, they should be able to do this quite well. But some people may struggle, and if they struggle, well, there you go. They're losing. We know that getting stronger limbs will help. Becoming more mobile and all of that will help as well. I wanted to also put in things like grip strength and things as well, but again, it's a bit like VO2 max. How are we gonna measure people's grip strength without a dynometer or getting someone to squeeze their bathroom scales? It's a bit. It's not very standardized. Is someone squeezing their bathroom?
Is that a way to do it?
That is one way to do it. I looked it up.
Really? Yeah. What, you squeeze your bathroom scale and see what kilograms or pounds
exactly,
is?
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Don't go do that. I know you're gonna break your scales now. Chinese gonna be like, what are you doing? Why are you in the scales? So that's one way to do it, but a dynometer is
there's definitely gonna be people listening to this doing it. I mean, I'm definitely gonna try that.
I know. Yeah, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it because I've got a glass one as well. I can imagine just being a bit too. It'll just shatter. I don't know. Yeah, but our grip strength can be fine. Like we're holding 50 kilo dumbbells. We're doing dead hangs. Another way to do it, but again, how well you can dead hang will depend on your body weight. So lighter people may have a better dead hang. So I didn't want to put it in, but. So we're not measuring grip strength. I've just been speaking about it, but the ones we're measuring are blood pressure, resting heart rate, waist to height ratio, and a one leg stand test. It's a good overall function of your physical parameters, I think. Just sort of low level, like the one leg stand test is quite easy to do. There's loads of other physical parameters that people can put in. There's like getting up from the floor without using your hands is a good test of function. There's sort of how many squats you can do. Leg sit as well, like when you sit on the side just using your quads, all that kind of stuff. All of these are really testing your leg strength, and obviously the dynometer is a grip strength, because both of these are correlated with reduced frailty and longer healthier lives as well.
Okay, amazing. So now you've got your BioHealth score, you've got the 5 core testing areas, got your let's say someone has got their score now. What are you looking at first when you go through this? How are you going to interpret someone's BioHealth score, and then how do you prioritize the actions, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, so you go through the score, you look at kind of where the firstly where the red flags are, right? You want to go by section. If they're green in one section, you're probably not going to be too focused on it. You can tell them, great, keep it up, keep doing what you're doing. But the areas that they might be lagging in are the areas you're going to kind of focus on and see, okay, why? So usually in the consultation, then we can have a discussion about kind of what the score shows. This is what flagged up. What do they know about it? What do they think about it? And kind of go through kind of speaking about what potential risk factors they may have. So, is it how have they been kind of exercising up until now? What's their nutrition like? What are the genetic, is there a family history issue as well? Once you've kind of assessed what the potential causes for this being the way, the numbers being the way they are, through kind of an assessment of their lifestyle factors usually, and a combination of the family as well, family history, then you can sort of think, okay, what levers can we pull, and then come up with sort of a plan, and kind of think, okay, what are they sort of able to do, willing to do, happy to do to make the changes as well, and then kind of put this in a report form to their coach as well, because again, their coach is going to be checking in with them on a weekly basis using this plan, right? So kind of, if it's, let's say, for example, I don't know, let's say let's say it's cholesterol. It's an easy one. I mean, it's not an easy one, but let's say cholesterol is slightly raised. Obviously, there could be a genetic component to it. There could be, their diet as well. Like, let's say they're not eating enough fiber. I find that's a big one. The reason fiber is so good is because when you eat foods that are high in, especially soluble fiber, it forms this sort of like almost paste in the small intestine, and that helps to take bile acids that your that your small intestine secrete via the gallbladder. It will help take that away, and cholesterol is actually used to create more of this bile acid. So because you're removing bile acid, your liver then has to use cholesterol to make more bile acid, because you need a certain amount in the gallbladder to help emulsify the fats that you're taking through your diet. So you can make these dietary shifts and put it into the nutritional plan to improve things. Yeah. Similarly, if their nutrient status isn't great, let's say their vitamin D is low, then you can actually tell them, okay, well, supplementation is probably what you need to do. This is what you do. This is the protocol. You can recheck it afterwards as well. So it's just looking at where things can be improved and stuff as well. Obviously, if there's issues with the physical parameters, like their blood pressure is high, then actually, depending on how high it is, should this be a conversation now they need to bring, we do encourage that people, when they get these blood tests done, if they haven't already shared it with their physician, they should be anyway, just because their physician should have a record of what their health is like as well. Like, that's just, anytime anyone gets a blood test done, even if you get a private blood test done, I encourage sharing it with your physician, and you should do that, because at the end of the day, your physician, your GP, your doctor knows your history, knows you, well, they should know you quite well, and they should be able to piece things together for you. And if they think that something needs clinical attention, then they should do that. So obviously, if I see someone's blood pressure is raised, then I can raise the alarm to them and say, look, blood pressure is much higher than where you'd want it. Actually, this could be a problem that you need to definitely speak to your doctor about. But if they're in that sort of range where they're not hypertensive, haven't got clinical high blood pressure, but actually they're just slightly above the normal range, then you can talk with them about, okay, how can we optimize this? And actually, it may be a case of just reducing the salt intake in the diet. If they're eating too much salt, it could be a case of they need to get their sleep better. They may need to reduce their alcohol intake. I can't imagine anyone be a smoker that's doing RNT, but there would be, right? People do smoke, right? So yeah. I mean, look, people smoke. It's one of those things where people think it's no big deal doing it once in a while, but actually that can affect blood pressure as well. So you just got to find out in that lifestyle factors, what is it that we can change and shift really, and then give that advice to them and also to their coach, so that they can make those changes. And then depending on what the status was of the result and where we think how quickly we can see the change, retesting and sort of I would definitely say the shortest period would be 3 months, but really 6 months is when we can see a nice sustained change being made, and then retest it.
Well, what I'll do is I'm due a BioHealth review, so I will I think I'll book in some time, and what we can do is we can record maybe how we go through the results live on my scoring, where I scored, where the gaps are, what can we implement, and then get into that 6 month cycle. Why is that retesting so important?
Yeah, I think obviously, you're testing at first to see if there's any issues, right? Retesting is important to see if the changes that we've sort of advised to implement have actually, made the difference, right? So, on one hand, so if people haven't scored that highly the first time round, we're obviously going to put some changes in place. The only way you're going to know if these changes have really worked is if you retest, and then you can rescore them and see. And what I think personally is that they are going to see positive changes, and these, when you do see positive changes, as well as I do, when it comes to any kind of behavioral change, you're motivated more by seeing changes. So obviously, with the physical transformation, you'll see, when you see fat loss happening, you're more motivated to carry on. You're bought into this lifestyle. Similarly, if you see that actually your blood work has gotten better and you see those changes, you're going to be more bought into actually making those lifestyle changes, especially when you recognize how important these things are, which we've discussed today, why these things are important. And it's just that positive reinforcement that we'll see in these behavioral and lifestyle changes. So yeah, you have to sort of retest it. I'd say at 6 months, at least give it 3 months, because you don't want to test too soon, because it's too soon to see any changes. But yeah, 6 months, even 1 year, you want to be making sure that you're doing the right thing.
If someone's listening to this and thinking, do I really need this? I feel fine. Yeah, what's this actually going to do for me? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about, I guess, people saying that they feel fine. What do they need? They don't need to really do anything. But at the end of the day, like, having these tests done can reveal a lot more about you than you may not have recognized. Because as I said before, like, a lot of these things are silent. They happen in the background. You're not really testing them until you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and by then a lot of the damage could potentially already be done. So if anyone asks me like when's the best time to test, I'd always say now. Like, why wait? Why do you want to wait until you're actually in stages of a disease process? And we know that the risk of disease increases with age, and intervening earlier reduces the risk of that disease. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. Like, if you could test, you'd test yesterday. Yeah.
I mean, I believe everyone on RNT should be exploring biohealth, and that's the reason why we're bringing it into the equation. So hopefully you've got enough time. Cool. So what would be one biomarker you'd want every person to test? Let's say you have to strip it all back and you go literally just one. What would be the one that you'd want to test?
Actually, I'm gonna be cheeky. So I'm saying two because these two help me make a one number. So HOMO IR.
Done.
So knowing, your HOMO IR, so your measure of insulin resistance, right? So if you measure your fasting glucose and fasting insulin, I think those two together is what I'd want to test. Just because I think that will give me an idea of whether I've got insulin resistance or not. And if I do, then alarm bell should be ringing, because why would I, what am I doing in my life that's, made me insulin resistant? Because insulin resistance is linked to the most poor metabolic health. Simple as. If you're insulin resistant, then your risk of heart disease goes up. At lower cholesterol levels as well. Like, you need to have your cholesterol over a certain point to get atherosclerosis. Don't get me wrong. But if you're already insulin resistant, then you're going to get damage being done at maybe a lower level than someone who's not insulin resistant, but you still have to have high cholesterol. You see what I mean? So I would want to know if I'm insulin resistant. So that'd be the first. Okay. That'd be the one that I would test. But in essence, I'd also want to know my ApoB or my non-HDL cholesterol as well.
Yeah, so that comes back to that metabolic health testing area. That's the big one.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, couple rapid fires then. Myths and truths, true or false. You can have perfect blood sugar and still be unhealthy.
Yes.
So that means you can still be unhealthy,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Because
is that because of the lipids and all that sort of stuff?
Lipids and all that stuff, but it depends what you mean by perfect blood sugar as well, right? Yeah, your kidney function could be off, your liver function could be off. You could have, like I said, you could be completely in normal sugar range. I know this is rapid fire, but I have to explain it as well. You can be in a complete normal sugar range and still be having kind of low level metabolic dysfunction going on, which is why it's so tricky. Why it's so tricky to pin down, and why people present to us only when things are going wrong. When they see a raised fasting sugar, then you go, oh, okay, what's going on? But they could have normal sugar at the time you tested it, but actually lots more could be going on under the hood. So yes.
If your doctor says your bloods are normal, you're fine.
False. False. And it's because normal is a range, and right now, sadly, disease is normal. In a way, like a lot more people are walking around metabolically unhealthy. Something silly like 75% of the US population is either overweight or obese. 75%. Yeah. So imagine like a significant portion of that, like 50% of them will be potentially insulin resistant as well. So what is normal really? Normal is a range of values that we've ascribed based on kind of the reference range of normal functioning adults, right? So yeah, your cholesterol is normal, but actually it's raised. And have you worked out my individual risk or not, kind of thing. That's one big thing. So if someone says your test is normal, I encourage people to ask, what are the values? And are the values normal, or are they in a risk range, but not high enough risk that you're worried enough to medicate me or really tell me about it? So
if you score 100 in biohealth, are you good?
I would say if you score 100 biohealth, you're doing better than the general population, and you're probably, you're doing well, and you just need to continue doing the right things, right? But it's scoring 100 in biohealth doesn't mean you're not going to suddenly develop something horrible. It's not a predictor of course. There's loads of things that can still happen to you, right? This is, but the biohealth score is something that we've created at RNT, right? It's not a validated medical clinical risk tool that's made by loads of consensus scientists and doctors sitting in a panel together. would be great. Yeah, there's loads of those risk tools that exist, right? And they do exist for individual things, but we're trying to kind of put it all together for our clients, really, and make it in a way that's sort of measurable for them and us. So we've ascribed these numbers and values to them. So I think, yeah, I mean, we should look at the scores so that we can help track the values, but at the same time, we should be looking at the breakdown of the scores. So you could have a really high score in the 90s, but actually your cholesterol could be through the damn roof. So I would still be like, look, your score is high, but there's a lot of work to do, right? Yeah. Don't just rest on the fact that you've got a good score of 90 and that means you're invincible. Similarly, even if your score's 100, there could be lots of things going on that we haven't checked, we haven't measured. But if you're feeling that you've got something going on, then by all means you should be speaking to your doctor about it, not relying on the 100 BioHealth score.
Good man. I mean, health is an ongoing pursuit.
Yeah.
Final one. Most lifestyle diseases are preventable if they're caught early.
I hate these truth or false.
Do you just want to do like a podcast on each of them?
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, because you have to caveat things. You can't, it's, I think most lifestyle diseases are probably preventable if, not just caught early enough, but if you put the right lifestyle factors in place long before they are going to develop, right? So most are probably, it makes sense, right? So yes, most are, but yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's part one of the BioHealth introduction. We're going to be sharing a lot more around BioHealth, what we're doing with it, some results we're getting from it with clients, how we evolve the process. So hopefully this is a good introduction for people, and I'm looking forward to kicking this off. Thanks for coming on, Minil.
Yeah, no worries. I think it's going to be one of those things where people will find that once it gets tested and they know, they can start improving it.